A few weeks back, there was a discussion between Alex O'Connor, also known as the Cosmic Skeptic, and inspiring philosophy Michael Jones. The topic of the conversation was whether God sends people to hell. Cosmic Skeptic was explaining why the position of one particular caricature on eternal conscious torment is one of the things that keep him from believing in God. Inspiring philosophy was describing the myriad of other interpretations that are current in the academic literature on the subject. Hell isn't really my subject. I don't really have a favorite view on hell. I feel that many of the views in the academic literature and the history of the church have merit. I'm more inclined to say that God deals with each person individually, and what's right for that person is what happens. I'm not sure what the active options are for each person. Either eternal conscious torment or some kind of universalism are most compatible with my view of eternity. I do find the various soteriological and post-mortem debates fascinating, even though I think we don't have enough data of the quality that would give us a precise answer to these questions. With that much said, I have never understood the place of objecting to the existence of a thing because you don't like the implications of it. A lot of facts in life are inconvenient. That almost never has any bearing on whether a fact is true or not. Even if whatever view of hell bothers me the most turns out to be the closest to the truth, that wouldn't be a reason to stop believing in God or hell. I'd much rather that lightning didn't have the potential to do serious damage to people and property. That isn't a reason to say that lightning didn't exist. Taxes are awfully inconvenient, but I still believe in them and the good that they do. This is just, in general, a poor way to go about building your belief system. The closest I could follow Cosmic Skeptic in his thought process would be to say that some kind of contradiction seems to exist, and that implies that there's more to the subject that needs to be thought out. I'm down with that. But that applies to many areas of deep study. General relativity breaks down and has contradictions. This leads physicists to conclude that general relativity isn't the end of theories about gravity. It doesn't lead them to reject relativity, to say that spacetime doesn't exist, or to say that Einstein was wrong. If Cosmic Skeptic were to take the positive evidence in theology and then focus on this area that bothers him, and he was finding solutions to these problems, then I would call it progress. But it bothers me that hell is an active option, so theology is false. Or, I don't feel like this is true, so it must be false, have always seemed to me to be regressive ways to approach an area of study in general. This was the approach of Newton's and Einstein's and Snow's detractors. In at least one case, Einstein, I know that a progressive thinker who normally followed the evidence even when it was not intuitive, fell back into regressive thinking when Bohr described quantum mechanics. This has been recognized ever since as one of Einstein's greatest errors. Let's give Cosmic Skeptic the benefit of the doubt on all this, though. There does come a point in an investigation when you have to make a choice: alchemy or chemistry, germ theory or miasma theory, universal gravitation or general relativity. Let's allow for the moment that Cosmic Skeptic has identified something like this: hell, or whatever he thinks the alternative that he's choosing is. I don't follow Cosmic Skeptic that closely, and I'm sure he's explained in other places what he would replace this theory with, but it didn't seem to come up in this discussion. For simplicity, let's just call it Cosmic Skepticism. Cosmic Skeptic has reached a point where he thinks he needs to choose between hell and Cosmic Skepticism. And since I don't actually know what Cosmic Skepticism is, the fair thing for me to do at this point is to assume he's right. There's a difference, and Cosmic Skeptic cannot reconcile hell with Cosmic Skepticism because they are actually irreconcilable. Another possibility is that Cosmic Skeptic is putting on a persona and asking the questions he knows his audience needs answered, regardless of his own knowledge or feelings on those questions. For this reason, I'm going to separate Alex O'Connor from the Cosmic Skeptic in this blog post. Alex O'Connor may have a much more nuanced view on all of this, but it's hidden behind the persona he's adopted for his audience. It may even be that he has done this subconsciously. So in this article, when I talk about Cosmic Skeptic and Cosmic Skepticism, I'm talking only about the parts of the position presented in this conversation. It should not in any way be taken as reflecting on Alex O'Connor himself. Now, I don't know what Cosmic Skepticism is, but there are clues as to what it is not and what some of the components are in the conversation. So I can take these points and evaluate them individually. A complete examination of Cosmic Skeptic's position might come to a different place, because different thoughts interact with each other in different ways. There may be points that are missing that change the way things come across. Cosmic skepticism may be partly a caricature and might include poorly constructed positions that Cosmic Skeptic was not actually intending to present a robust defense for. I don't expect a robust reply even if he were to read this, partly because for all I know there is a robust reply out there in his material somewhere, and partly because all he may have to say is that it wasn't his real position, and partly because he's got a busy schedule and I would be amazed if I made the priority list. That much said, cosmic skepticism as I saw it in that dialogue does seem to have two components that I find highly dubious. The first is a commitment to a Jack Chick Bible tract vision of eternal conscious torment. One of the very first things that inspiring philosophy does in the discussion is to explain that this is not the only scholarly view on the afterlife. Despite that, this is the vision that Cosmic Skeptic comes back to over and over again. Whenever inspiring philosophy would say something about conditional immortality, universalism, the possibility of post-mortem revelation, or even other ideas of eternal conscious torment, Cosmic Skeptic would come right back to the Jack Chick style of eternal conscious torment as though the other ideas about the afterlife hadn't even been mentioned. Over and over, inspiring philosophy would say something to the effect of, "But as I've been saying," and repeat the ideas and sometimes even the list of scholars that support that view again. Timestamps 1052, 1730, 28:41, 36:59, 52:38, 54:45, 56:12, 59:36, 1 hour 1 minute and 2 seconds, 1 hour 3 minutes and 44 seconds. This shows a decided lack of openness to the subject. I have hearing damage. Sometimes my daughter will say something, and I hear something different. And then sometimes I'm messing with her because I don't really want to answer the question. The first time my daughter asks, "Can I have more Minecraft mine coins?" and I answer with, "Sure, go fix yourself whatever you'd like to eat." Chances are better than good that I've misheard. "Can I have more marshmallows?" The second time she asks more clearly, it's less likely that I heard her wrong and more likely that I'm messing with her. The third time, unless there are external factors, she pretty much assumes I'm messing with her. Whether Cosmic Skeptic is doing so consciously or subconsciously, he's messing with inspiring philosophy. If Cosmic Skeptic were reacting to one video where inspiring philosophy said one time that there were alternative views that have been part of the Christian discourse as far back as we have records of the discourse, and that these views are still part of the academic conversation, then it might be that Cosmic Skeptic misheard or misunderstood inspiring philosophy. But inspiring philosophy said it 9 times directly to him. The probability that Cosmic Skeptic simply misunderstood him reduced with every repeat. This is highlighted at the end, where Cosmic Skeptic claimed never to have heard these fringe views before, and inspiring philosophy repeated the names of theologians he'd been quoting the whole hour. This points out that the only reason Cosmic Skeptic hasn't heard these alternative views is because he hasn't gone looking for them. Even now that he's been presented with them, he's still not open to the thought. That highlights the second part of Cosmic Skepticism that I'm dubious about. Cosmic Skeptic acts convinced that anyone presented with the full data is going to embrace it. Yet Cosmic Skeptic doesn't. He's presented with a more robust explanation of the scholarly debate on a subject that bothers him about God, and rather than admit that the topic is more complex than he first thought, he decides that this can only be a new, fringe view and dismisses the thought so that he can continue to be bothered by God. Even if this is a caricature he puts on to ask more questions, it wouldn't actually help anyone unless there were real people that acted like that in his audience that he was trying to impress. The fact that there are real people that act like this is highlighted by the popularity of shows like Ancient Aliens and Ghost Hunters. While I'm personally open to the idea of ghosts or aliens, I would take the study more seriously if it came from sources that used controls and statistical methods instead of false dichotomies and erroneous documentation. While Ancient Aliens has 19 seasons, I'm not aware of any major network documentary series that takes a critical approach to knowledge and has kept an audience for more than 3 seasons. Past that, look at the politicizing in social media. When AI is trained on the actual choices people make to decide what they will prefer in the future, they prefer items that will reinforce their pre-existing beliefs in more extreme ways. In studies where they have given people well-reasoned articles that contradict their deeply held beliefs, people reject reason and facts rather than change their beliefs to fit the data. And certainly Cosmic Skeptic knows these things, and yet clings desperately to the idea that if people were just shown the facts about God, they would change. This goes to show that even Cosmic Skeptic isn't changing his beliefs to fit the data. The idea that people are rejecting the truth just because they haven't been exposed to it is incredibly naive. Anytime I hear this idea expressed, the only response I can muster is, "Have you met people? People aren't like that." If that's what you think people are like, you're either very isolated and don't know many people, or you're ignoring what people are really like. If God is speaking to Cosmic Skeptic through inspiring philosophy, then the conversation was a back and forth of Cosmic Skeptic saying, "I just personally see hell as unjust for this simple reason, and I reject God because of it." Then God says, "Your core assumptions are inaccurate, here's more accurate data that undermines your position." To which Cosmic Skeptic simply dismisses with, "Well, okay, but I personally see hell as unjust for this same simple reason." This is a circle. Why should we think that it stops being a circle just because the conversation went on for 2 hours instead of 1? Or 3? Or 10? Or days? Or weeks? Or centuries? Cosmic Skeptic simply asserts that people exposed to the truth will always change their minds. Where is his evidence? I think it's incredibly naive to think this is going to change just because people have been exposed to God. Leaving to one side what that means, the vast majority of us have been exposed to God, so that's even against the evidence, but also beyond the scope of this reply. How many people attribute the worst, most extreme positions to the whole of the opposite political party? And studies show that most of us are actually fairly centrist compared to these extreme caricatures that our opponents believe in. Is that because we've never met anyone of the other party? Oh no. How often will someone say, "I have friends that are Democrat/Republican, but they're not like most of them." Yes, they are. But we sell ourselves the lie that that side is all wrong and unreasonable despite knowing people personally that prove we're wrong. I don't see any reason to suspect that it will be any different when we meet God. People will still be people. Given the choice between accepting the evidence that God is right and therefore submitting to God in the end or going to hell, people will choose hell. How do I know? Because that's what they're doing right now, as I've explained. What's more, it's what Cosmic Skeptic is choosing right now. The third thing that Cosmic Skepticism is bound to that I find dubious is the idea that faith, as expressed in the Bible and early theologians, is about embracing facts. I know this is a fairly common lay-level view of faith today, but it has never been a scholarly view, and this view as a lay-level majority doesn't even seem to me to go back before the Reformation. The idea of Christopher Hitchens was brought up a few times early in the conversation. The idea Cosmic Skeptic raised was, if Christopher Hitchens were exposed to the creator of the universe after death, surely he would charge his mind and believe. So what? The rich man that envied Lazarus believed in terms of academic assent. It did him no good. The demons have better, more accurate personal understanding of history and theology than we do. This causes them to tremble in fear, not bow in obedience. James 2 verse 19, the view Cosmic Skeptic highlights views the entrance exam to heaven as some sort of multiple choice or short answer quiz. If this were the case, then Cosmic Skeptic would be right. If God gave us the official answer book and said to take all the time we need, someone would have to be pretty foolish to purposely not give the right answer just to prove a point. No one in the scholarly field or in the first 1,000 years of Christianity views the entrance exam to heaven that way, though. There are various views of exactly what that entrance would look like, to be sure. Here isn't really the place for me to go into my favorites. Some view it as a checklist. Did you get the right sacraments? Some view it as obedience. Did you obey the right commands? Some have much more complicated views. Some, like Origen, were universalists and think that everyone makes it eventually, which seemed much less complicated to me. But the idea that you're not going to get into heaven because you misspelled or mispronounced Jesus, or because you can't accurately tell his genealogy, was never seen as viable until fairly recently, and then only at the lay level. Like inspiring philosophy, I'm what's often described as a hopeful universalist. There's obviously often some level of evidence or force or whatever that will cause people to change their minds. Otherwise, there would be no intellectual progress in any field. We would all still be living in mud huts thinking that the world is flat and the sun moves around us and electric shock is the result of black magic. Maybe the beatific vision is compelling enough to convince everyone. Maybe the intermediate state is long enough to convince everyone. Maybe I'm wrong about what eternity is like and eventually everyone will make it. Even in individual cases, I've often said that I don't think rejecting the God of the cosmological or teleological arguments is enough to damn someone. I don't think anyone is damned or saved based on their acceptance or rejection of theological or historical facts. Certainly, acceptance of all the right historical and theological facts has not helped the demons, James 2 verse 19, and lacking the required historical and theological facts was not held against Abel, David, or Naaman. I think it's the degree to which someone believes and lives like good will win in the end. Maybe there's some other solution I haven't even thought of. Anytime I hear that someone has died in a state of violence and pursuit of pleasure, my response is, I hope that in the next life they can find the peace that eluded them in this life. There are times when we have strong reason to suspect that at least part of their behavior is the result of damage that's been done to them. If someone is cranky primarily because their leg has chronic pain, then once the leg is fixed they might be ready for healthy relationships. There's no one that I look to and say, I hope that they end up in hell. But I do hope that whomever is unwilling to embrace true justice and true mercy is given the chance without being forced, and I recognize that a necessary consequence is the possibility that some will reject it, and they'll live in an eternity apart from justice and mercy. I also think that an element of epistemic humility is healthy. I may be a hopeful universalist, but both the hope and the despair are based on what I don't know. Cosmic Skeptic acts very sure of himself that everyone who is presented with solid evidence will change their mind. Despite the abundant evidence to the contrary, as ironic as that is. He's so sure that he's going to reject any idea of hell that doesn't account for this. I, in contrast, look at the actual evidence and see how completely it works against that idea, and still leave room for the idea that I could be wrong. I have the humility to say, I've been wrong before about things that I was even more certain about than this. I might be wrong about this. I'm not going to throw out a concept of hell that's incompatible with my vision of human nature or eternity. I'm going to put those discussions in their proper place in the theoretical framework. Each theological question in its proper place. You might be wrong about how willing people in general are to change to match the evidence, even at the beatific vision. You may even be wrong about your own willingness to examine and embrace new data. To pin your entire belief in God on whether your concept of how willing people are to accept data which contradicts their beliefs seems regressive to me. At the very least, if you were going to pin your belief in God to that, I would expect overwhelming evidence that your thoughts on this were right. While I'm well enough read in Christian history not to tie my belief in God to young earth creationism, I've met those who have. I've never been impressed by a young earth creationist that I've met, though. I've always felt like if you're going to reject the experts, you better be very certain that there's no other valid way to read Genesis, and the multitude of books and articles exploring that subject should at least be reason to give at least a little doubt about that. Similarly, if you're going to reject belief in God based on your understanding of human nature, it seems you should need vastly overwhelming evidence that your understanding of human nature is the right one, and the evidence I've cited above should at least grant a little bit of doubt about that. I hope that my read on Cosmic Skeptic is wrong. I hope that what I saw was a caricature, and that his position is better researched and shows more self-examination than what I saw. As someone who actually does read about these things, it's frustrating to hear someone say, I've been studying this question for 10 years. only to have them sputtering like a fish out of water when they can't explain why they've never heard of post-mortem revelation or conditional immortality or Christian universalism. Research. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. I hope that Alex O'Connor can demonstrate a more thoughtful approach to these issues in other places.